The mountain ranges and oak forests of central Spain are home to one of Europe's most elusive and secretive predators. As twilight settles on these ancient forests, they wake to a changed world of sound and shadow. In the deadly game of detect and evade, the hunters and the hunted alike must watch, but above all, listen. The genet is a mysterious, graceful animal that's neither cat nor mongoose. Few people have even glimpsed it, yet in parts of Spain the genet is relatively common. The genet slips through a dim world of moonlit branches, a raider of the night. The late winter sun rises over Extremadura's desert. These Mediterranean woodlands, managed for centuries for cork bark and acorns, provide food and shelter for many migrants. At this time of the year, the world's entire population of European cranes descends to feed on both acorns and insects. The birds remain in family groups, and their calls ring out from dawn to dusk. Today's cranes have been flying over this wild landscape since the Ice Age. It's more reminiscent of Africa than Europe, and it was from North Africa that the genets arrived during the Arab invasion 1,000 years ago. They flourished and spread very quickly amid the rocky outcrops and dense vegetation. Surprisingly large areas of semi-wilderness still remain in Spain, and it is amongst the tall deciduous trees and dense scrub of such a woodland that genets still thrive today. It is rare to catch a glimpse of a genet during the day. In Spain, its nearest relative is another immigrant from Africa, the Egyptian mongoose. The two animals are very different. The mongoose has a rat-like appearance. Its tiny eyes, small ears and short, strong claws are better suited to digging out rabbit warrens. It is a daylight operator. Whereas the genet's bat-like ears, super-sensitive eyes, and an unerring nose are perfectly adapted to night raiding. The mongoose is an opportunistic hunter that follows its nose, grabbing birds, reptiles, or carrion as it goes. It remains firmly on the ground. It's a fine February evening in Spain's Sierra de Gredos. The genets will just be stirring for their night activities. As a hunter's moon rises through the hazy atmosphere, a male genet scans the night sounds. He has a large territory to patrol. A moth is quickly snatched up, then he travels on. To keep rivals away, he may need to cover as much as 20 kilometers per night. A rustling in the grass betrays his favorite meal, a wood mouse. They do use their eyes when hunting, but at night their acute sense of hearing has a much more important role to play. In winter, wood mice abound, living off their stores of acorns. At this time of the year, they form around 80% of the genet's diet. They are no match for the predator's speed and agility. He uses his tail for balance. A genet usually hunts down and seizes his prey in one swift move. But sometimes he has to wait patiently by a hole for the mouse to re-emerge. Genets need to eat the equivalent of about 6 mice a night because they burn up a lot of energy. A neighboring male is also patrolling his territory. He reaches a vantage point where both their territories meet. He must renew his territorial scent mark. It will be a sign to other males to keep off. He secretes a pungent substance from his anal glands. It is similar to musk that is extracted from its relative, the African civet, for making perfume. Its odor may last for weeks. The first male, having finished his mouse, becomes aware of the other one and climbs to get a better look. He can see the intruder, who has discovered the scent of another genet, perhaps a female, whose range overlaps with his own. He vigorously rubs his body on this rock to absorb the smell onto his fur, as well as to deposit the scent from other glands on his back. The other male drops down to investigate. Clearly, it's an exciting experience. He seems unaware of his rival, but a confrontation begins to look inevitable. There's little contact, but a lot of noise. The arched back, sideways stance, and raised fur all serve to exaggerate the male genet's size. Ownership of the area is reaffirmed for now. Territories change with the seasons and the availability of food. Genets are creatures of habit, even to the extent that several may share a communal latrine over the course of many years. It's a good way of finding out who else is in the neighborhood. The genet leaves a scent mark as a calling card. These latrines are very often all the people ever see of the genet, even to people who come here every day, like the local goat herder. They are the only clue to their presence. Antonio's been shepherding goats in this area for most of his life, like his father before him. And he's yet to see a live genet. Yet, come nightfall, a genet hunts amid the patches of lavender where Antonio passed by earlier in the day. The spring flowers attract a host of insects, especially moths. But a diet of moths won't satisfy a genet. He's in search of much larger prey. It could be that the genet was introduced to Spain by the Moors to control pests such as mice and rats. They are certainly at home around houses and farm buildings. Their ability to invert their hind legs is as useful for climbing down walls as it is for descending trees. They are excellent mousers, and this skill must have been greatly prized before cats were domesticated. The genet is no match for a cat, so they were soon displaced. A rat, on the other hand, is well within the genet's capabilities. The rat's pretty large, about a quarter of the predator's body weight. A genet's jaws are relatively weak compared to those of a cat. So once he has seized the rodent by the neck, he pummels it with his hind feet, then takes his prey to a more secluded place to devour his catch. He's going to need all the energy he can get. It's early spring, the genet mating season. A female genet who shares part of the male's territory is now in season. Normally, she would avoid him, but her scent is drifting downwind and she's been discovered. He can sense that she is ready to mate and seeks her out. It's vital that he finds her tonight. But when he does, at first she rejects his advances. But the mating season is short, only 2 days, so there's little time to waste. It is now that the sense of smell comes into its own. The male repeatedly sniffs the female's dorsal crest, a line of raised hair along the back that emits a strong scent which clearly excites him. He'll continue to follow her for several hours and may mate with her several times. Afterwards, the pair will have little more to do with each other. If they meet again, it will be by accident. By spring, it is already warm, but the sun has yet to reach the searing heat of summer. Open meadows are still lush and carpeted with ox-eyed daisies and viper's bugloss. The grassland is a good hunting ground for the Azio winged magpie, which, like the genets, was also introduced. Portuguese sailors brought them back from China hundreds of years ago. A breeding colony have their nests in one of the oak trees. The wind brings a change in the weather. Sudden storms are typical at this time of the year. It's 10 weeks since the Genet mated, and she's about to give birth within the safety of a hollow tree. It's a tight squeeze for her swollen body. The young are normally born tail first and emerge blind and helpless. Genets usually have only 1 or 2 offspring. She washes the first kit as the second one emerges. She'll remain with them constantly for the first few days of their lives. As the storm passes, unusually, a third kit is born. It won't be an easy job for her, with so many mouths to feed. "3,000 meters high, the Gredos Mountains are still covered in snow, which will feed the streams and rivers throughout the summer. Only rarely will the flow of water cease, even in the hottest years. A family of great tits have nested inside a stone oak. They have lined their nest with some genet hairs from a nearby tree where the genets have their den. The genet kits are 2 days old. They are still blind, so finding the teat has its problems, but their sharp little claws help them to cling onto her and keep suckling when she moves, even when it's time for her to leave. The female hasn't gone on a hunting trip since they were born. Up till now, she's been living off her reserves of fat. Already the great tit chicks are leaving the nest. The parents have to coax the last one out with food. But it lands awkwardly and breaks a leg on impact. It's a plucky little bird, and is still determined to be fed. The mother comes down to feed it as usual and tries to administer her own first aid. But it's not a serious handicap. Meanwhile, the kit's eyes have opened, although their ears are still bent forward and not fully functional. They need feeding every 2 hours, but soon she must begin to hunt regularly again. It's not yet quite dark when the great tits see her emerge and begin to call in alarm. The adult birds are quite safe, but the injured chick is still on the ground and calling to them. The chick's only chance is to remain perfectly motionless and silent. The genet hunts mainly by sound. Unbelievably, the chick avoided detection. A road on a wet night is a productive, although often hazardous, hunting ground. For the natterjack toad, it proved fatal. Genets do not normally scavenge, but this female is very hungry. But despite her hunger, she cannot eat the toad. The toxic skin secretions that protected it in life act even after death. She returns to more familiar terrain. A garden dormouse would make an excellent meal, but seems remarkably adept at evading capture. Every night, the genet will need to catch enough food to provide sufficient milk for her 3 hungry kits throughout the day. Wood mice are far easier quarry and very common. At last, she secures her prey. She returns to the nest to tend and feed her litter. Not far away, a tawny owl is raising young of its own. The owl does not pose a threat to an adult genet, but both compete for the same prey. A single large chick is being raised in a split tree and fed on a diet of small birds and rodents. The dormouse is out of reach within its nest. It's only at risk when it ventures outside to feed. Surprisingly, insects are as much part of the menu as acorns and other nuts. As the sun rises, the night shift beds down for the day. The goat herds are busy collecting milk from their goats to make cheese. They soon discover that something has been at their cheese during the night. A trap is set to catch the culprit. They suspect a genet, but it could just as easily be a cat or a marten. At 3 weeks old, the kits are not yet ready to accompany their mother, but they are getting restless and curious about the outside world. This little male is more adventurous than the others. He is determined to follow her. But it's too soon for such a young animal to venture outside. He's not so confident once on the ground and immediately calls to his mother. The last thing she wants is a clumsy youngster around while she's hunting. A new batch of goat's cheese is being prepared in a hut specially constructed over a stream to keep the cheese cool. It's not long before the night raider shows herself. Genets are wary creatures and are very careful where they put their feet. For the second night, she finds the cheese hut an easy source of food. She leaves the hut as cautiously as she entered. It's almost dawn, and she must return to her den to spend the day sleeping and nursing her young. The identity of the night raider will remain a mystery. The goat herder's cheese has once again been nibbled. The azure-winged magpie chicks are growing well. Both parents feed them on a diet of grubs and other insects. Great care is taken to see that all the chicks receive their fair share. He tries out each beak with a caterpillar to test which has the largest appetite. Feeding continues all day long. As Antonio returns with his goats for the evening milking, the Genet is preparing for another night's hunting. The magpies have spotted the danger, but there is little they can do. Their mobbing tactics and raucous calls have little effect on the Genet. They take great risks to defend their chicks, but it's hopeless. Only one of their chicks is lost. The Genet snatches it and leaves in the pandemonium. She returns to her nest to share her prize with her kits, who by now are taking solid food. Meanwhile, the villagers are preparing for a feast of a different kind. The celebrations start off at Antonio's home and then move into the town. The farm is left unattended, an easy target for the raiders of the dark. The Genet approaches cautiously. Dogs and cats are its mortal enemies, but there is something here worth stealing. While the Genet is busy raiding their homes, the villagers are taking part in an annual firework fiesta that's as dangerous as it looks. The aptly named Torre de Fuego, which means bull of fire, is now a tradition in Candeleda. The risk of charred clothes and the odd burns to arms and necks is considered well worth taking to run with the bull. Accidentally, all the fireworks ignite at once. Antonio keeps up with the rest. The Genet uses all its agility to raid grapes. It seems an unlikely food for such an adept hunter, but the fruit provides a valuable source of sugar and moisture. She'll eat a dozen or more in a single visit. Not enough to affect this year's wine production. The fiesta is reaching its spectacular finale in the ballroom. On her return, the kits lick off the sweet moisture from around their mother's face. They're getting ready to leave the den themselves for the first time. They sit at the entrance, taking in the night sounds until the coast is clear. They seem a little reluctant, but soon get the hang of climbing headfirst down trees. It appears from their behavior that she has 2 males and a female youngster. The males are more boisterous than their sister. This is the only way they'll learn to develop their hunting skills. The female takes time out for a wash and uses her paws just like a cat. Their mother catches a low-flying beetle, and the kits rush up to sample the new food. Life will not be easy for the family. Foxes, dogs and cats will be their enemies. If they make it to the autumn, then they will have a good chance of reaching adulthood. Eventually, the female decides that enough is enough, and it's time her kits return to the safety of the den. She picks up one, and the other two follow. It's now late summer, and the nightjars emerge at dusk to produce their strange, trilling song. They swoop to catch insects on the wing. The kits are now almost as big as their mother, and are starting to leave the den to accompany her on her nightly forays. They do still have a lot to learn. The youngsters are becoming increasingly bold and very adept at climbing. They appear almost fearless and willing to attack anything, even a metre-long ladder snake. It's not venomous, but is still a formidable quarry. The hunt is more successful as a team effort, but this cooperation will not last long. As adults, they will lead a solitary existence. They're so alert that little escapes their attention. But it's wood mice that will form the biggest part of their diet, so it's these that they must learn to hunt. Insects, such as moths, are relatively easy to catch. Blackberries are a useful source of moisture and sugar, and it was presumably from these that the genet developed its taste for grapes. Members of the viverrid family, like the genets, civets and mongooses, are unusual in their taste for fruits and vegetable matter, as well as animal prey. Genets also regularly eat small amounts of grass. Some prey items are a little more difficult to overcome. There's a definite art when it comes to catching hold of this one. The rivers in this part of Spain are full of crayfish. Like the genet, they are not a native species, but introduced in this case from North America. The crayfish brought with them a disease to which they were immune, but which all but wiped out the resident crayfish population. The American version is slightly larger and has stronger claws. A fact which the young genet learns to his cost. The genet was introduced to Spain by the Moors over 1,000 years ago. Whether they brought it with them for its mouse-catching abilities, or its fur, we'll never know. It could just as easily have been a complete accident, as a stowaway on board ship hidden inside rolls of carpets and other stores. However it happened, the genet is well established and here to stay. One of the most graceful and agile of Europe's night raiders.